the parade committee, but to, in particularly, Janice Berry, who was on the parade advisory board at that time. So I'm just going to read it because I think it helps kind of set the tone for what this event is all about. So it says, "Good morning, Jan and the parade committee. Thank you for the opportunity of participating in the Labor Day Parade. This is a great event for two primary reasons. One is that it permits us to participate in a community event which shows our pride in the city of Rock Island. More importantly, it permits the citizens, the residents, the inhabitants, the people of our city to also participate in this great gathering. I am including several snapshots which were taken as I drove along the route. These show Rock Island and the people as they are in a relaxed and friendly atmosphere. Now, Stanley would put the furniture van in, and as he drove the van, he would turn and take a photo of people who were watching the parade. And then, so all these photos are like, hey, and oh, and so, but that was his thing. If visitors are desirous of knowing what Rock Island is all about, they should attend the Labor Day Parade. They should also look around and see the residents, the people who live here. They can see them en masse as they watch the grand event of the year. Friendly, pleasant as individuals or with family and friends, the people sitting along our route are a pleasure to view. They are all first class. These people are here all year long as they handle their everyday lives. The parade permits us to see them as they are in a relaxed situation, best indicating their temperaments as their style of living. If anyone wants to see what Rock Island is all about, he or she needs to only ride one of the wagons or cars. Better yet, he or she could walk the route of the parade and look the crowd over. He or she would recognize that Rock Island is the people who are here and that these people are great. Best personal regards, Stanley." So we wanted to start out our presentation with remarks. Give you a sense of not only how the parade impacts people. I mean, the fact that it motivated Stanley Goldman to write a letter is pretty interesting. Not that he didn't write letters, because he certainly did, but the fact that he took the time to do that, and the fact that he put his entry in and took those pictures, he's just an example. I ordered our porta potties for the parade today and spent 10 minutes on the phone with the person that I've ordered them with for many years, who went on and on about how important this parade has been to their family. You just never know. You just never know. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mary Chappell. With me today is Grace Shirk and Art Milton. We are all members of the Rock Island Labor Day Parade Advisory Board. We appreciate this opportunity to come before you today to provide some history about the Rock Island Parade, to share a bit about how we organize the event, and to talk about your responsibilities as council members. We also understand that there are other presentations scheduled, so we promise to keep things moving along. So let's look back. In June of 1985, former Mayor Millett asked for citizen volunteers to help celebrate Rock Island's 150th birthday or sesquicentennial. A group of 30 individuals met in this room to brainstorm ideas. A professor friend of mine nudged me, and I came to that meeting. After a few meetings, it was decided that a year-long series of events would be scheduled at various locations across the city to honor Rock Island's rich history, to celebrate its current community, and to look forward to the future. The first event planned, again, this was June, the whole sesquicentennial year was launched at the Summerfest, if you remember that. That was in July. And next thing you know, we're planning a parade for Labor Day. So we had 60 days. Members of the main planning committee wanted to do something that would bring the community together at the start of the special sesquicentennial year. The old-fashioned notion of an old-fashioned Labor Day parade was important, as the purpose of the event was not political, not labor-related, but rather to provide a reflection of Rock Island and what makes the surrounding community so special. So an 8-member task force off the other committee got together. We started contacting local schools, churches, businesses, officials, and organizations to extend the invite for what was to be a one-time only event, the big sesquicentennial, first event of that year-long series. Some members worked their connections. Others literally opened the phone book and randomly contacted any potential business located in Rock Island. The result was a parade of 68 entries. I remember doing that, opening the phone book and going, what do we got? And there was Illinois Oil Products. That was my call. They were in the parade for many years. Who knew? An oil business, Rock Island? What was that about? So we had 68 entries, and I believe the parade cost just a little over $230. But a couple years later, one of the interesting things that developed as a part of this event was the first marshals for the parade were Berger Swenson and Conrad Bergendoff, both Augustana-related amazing individuals. The second year, we went with the Small Business, State of Illinois Small Business Award winner, and his name was Behruz Jaliar, and he was the president over at Service Rubber. And his big question was, Marshall, guns? Do I have to wear them? He was quite a character. But the following year, in '87, was the start of the Citizen of the Year event, because if this parade was going to keep going, as it was, then how are we going to select our marshal? So Grace Shirk, who was on the council at that time, came up with the idea of doing the Citizen of the Year program, and then, now it's taken it on a whole new phase, so we're very excited that it's moving forward. But that's when that started. So at the 5-year point, after Parade 1, 2, 3, 4, and then here came 5, the task force was renamed as the Rock Island Labor Day Parade Advisory Board, with members appointed by the mayor. The advisory board currently has 8 members. So this, as I may have mentioned, this is a city council event. You approve what we do, and over the years, we have met and taken direction from you in various ways. For example, when at year 5 or 10, we needed an increase in our budget to bring in more music or to add something, we had to come back to council and get that permission. There was also the year when we came back and said, what would you like to ride through the parade in? And you discussed that, and we made that happen. So it's always been kind of interesting. So the current structure of the event and the planning has been in place for many years now, with the underlying goal of keeping costs down and working towards adding more music or floats. So when it comes to city support, I just wanted to briefly mention to you how this all happens. We do have an annual budget of $17,700 that covers band sponsorships for 6 to 8 local marching units and bands, which is about $7,000. The Western Illinois University Band, and it has their own additional requirements plus another fee. We have to pay for their transportation and their lunch. We get golf carts, porta potties, t-shirts for volunteers, tow vehicles for the flatbed bands, sound system costs for our announcers, banner costs, ribbons and awards, food for volunteers, etc. Marching bands receive a stipend of $400. We started out at $250 when the high school director at Rocky, Mr. Butterfield, said, we need something to pay for the buses. So that's where the $250 came from. Well, over time, so many years, that cost goes up. So we kept increasing that cost, and we're now at $400. Flatbed bands, those are the ones on the flatbeds that are combos or maybe just a solo artist. They receive $350. And if they don't have a flatbed, and $450 if they do have a flatbed. Other marching groups, such as the Kilty group, they receive $500, and of course the Metro Steppers, they're in at $400. Western Illinois has that participation fee of $1,500 plus their transportation, and we think that when they came on board, they just added so much to the parade, just really elevated the level of, when you think of a parade and you think of marching bands. We were very excited to get them. This is, I think, their 19th year of being with us, so we're very excited that they're back. We seek donations for all of these payouts. So we go and ask people to sponsor the bands. It ebbs and flows every year. We get some that are in, some that are out. If you are familiar, if you have a business that you think might be interested in covering one of our bands, please let me know. And this year we raised the parade entry fee to $10. It had been $5 for individual and a family, and then $10 for a business, and this year we just raised it all to $10. Police support along the parade route, obviously invaluable, and we get that. It's so wonderful. Liability coverage under the city's policy, which is very important to us. We have to send that proof of insurance around to various entities. Staff liaison, Linda Moore, she's our staff liaison. She does an outstanding job. She, of course, takes in the entries. She's created a database. She prints out the lists for us so we can review them at our meetings. She handles all of our mailings, She just does a lot to keep us supported, which also allows us access to a copying machine, which is needed, in the paper. We do mailings. We do one in March, save the date postcard, and introduce the theme. In April, we send out a mailing to about 16 musical groups in the area. In May, we send out the full-fledged parade participation mailing to all the past participants. In July, we're going to send out a little reminder postcard about the date that's coming up, the deadline date. And then in August, once the parade is in and lined up, we do that on a Saturday, and the following Monday, we send out a lineup mailing, which tells you where you are in the parade and where you need to go on parade day. So it's a pretty crazy turnaround towards the end of the month. We also work with the street department, ordering the barricades and doing minor street repairs. Map and sign making through the CED department. It's great to have that. We used to work with Public Works. And if you can imagine this is sort of an old-fashioned notion, but years ago we had the manager of the Hy-Vee on the board, and he had Mary, who was his sign maker, who put the signs in the grocery store windows, those old-fashioned signs. She made our signs for the parade, those that would announce council members or Citizen of the Year. So what makes the parade work? Well, I think we keep it simple. It's well organized. We've got a great team of volunteers. We can flex on parade day to handle just about anything that comes up, which we try to. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to work with a wonderful group of open volunteers. They're very solicitous. They want to make sure that everybody who comes to the parade, that they have a good experience. They're great ambassadors for this event. I love the variety and the novelty entries. I think that keeps our attendees coming back. The family entries, kids on bikes, families who turn their bikes into airplanes. Love that. Santa, we've had Santa in. We need a Santa. Citizen support, of course, those who set up their chairs at 6:30 on parade day to get their position just right. And then we receive random donations from people. People that know that I'm involved with the parade will say, Mary, here's $20 or here's $50 towards the event, which is wonderful. As I mentioned, securing the Western bands, securing military bands that we've had in the past. Gaining additional high school bands from across the community is great, and then the addition of the flatbed bands. I mentioned earlier the creation of the Citizen of the Year program, which is so unique to Rock Island and has been kind of an inspiration to other communities. The addition of parade announcers. Some of you may know that we have an announcer at the Wells Fargo Bank parking lot. We have one at the turn onto 24th Street, and then we have one at the former Country Market parking lot. What a great addition. So helpful. Lets people know what's coming, and they hear the information about our Citizens of the Year. And then the commitment, of course, of the City Council over the years. Obviously, we couldn't do this without your support. The advisory board members and the precious volunteers who helped with the event. About 80 people on parade day helped this event happen. The strength of the parade is that it's well organized, or it's got a good process going. We're always seeking feedback from City Council to assist with future planning. And I'm always looking for new members of the advisory board. Obviously, with all committees, all organizations, we're always looking to bring more people in to carry on the traditions if that's what is so desired by the council. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to have Art come up, and he's going to talk about how we organize this event.
This sits in a treasured spot in our house. When we built a house, it moved to another treasured spot. This is something that I've done for one more year than I taught. And another way of putting it, more than half my life. So, it's parade day. Lots of things have happened, as Mary just suggested. I get up around 5:30, 5:45, and the first thing I do is check the weather. And then I check it again, and I look on 3 different places. That's because one time years ago, the weather was absolutely clear in the whole Midwest except down by Decatur. No problem. About 9:30 in the morning, we got deluged by a flood, literally. Everybody in the parade area was wet, and yet we kept going. We started out and people want to know what happened to us. Was there a fire hose? And I checked it out later. That one spot got all the rain. So I still check the weather, but not always happy with, not always trusting it. The challenge in doing the parade from the very beginning was how to do it in the space that we have. We do not have a big parking lot. We can't just do line and line and line and line. We're using the public streets around Washington Junior High School, and the trick is to set things up so each of those streets and locations become a feeder. The image I thought of early on was when someone explained to me how a central processing unit works in the computer. All this information comes in and it sorts it out and it organizes it into files. That's how we work. Side streets are the files which hold something, school kids, Washington band, the Washington athletic place is for the bands. As the parade expanded from 68 the first year with just 2 bands to eventually around 100 or more units with up to 6, 7 bands, and now, oh yes, don't forget the flatbeds. We have expanded and expanded, and now we go from 32nd Street all the way to 38th Avenue with some spillover down by Wendy's and also over at the South Park Presbyterian Church. The trick is to have people ready to go when it's time. Just in time is indeed a motto. Another motto for me, do any of you know the Corps of Engineers motto? Really? Prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And if you do that, and you really do the thinking about what the worst is, you don't have everything covered, but you have a lot of things covered, and when something comes out of left field in the stratosphere, you have time to think about it and react. And our whole committee tends to operate that way, even on parade day, because strange things happen. So, parade day. I then do drive the route. I leave a car over at the high school because I'll need it later at the end of the parade. I look at all the people that are lined up, chairs and chairs and chairs along the way, which is actually shows their faith, I think. And the volunteers all begin to gather up at the northwest corner of Washington. We have the Davenport Amateur Radio Club, who's provided communications for us. Most years it's worked, except the year we had a miss when the radio waves would not travel through the air. The volunteers begin to arrive. The entries begin to arrive. For 34 years, the schools of Rock Island and the Catholic schools have all come to this parade. Rock Island schools on one side of Washington, Catholic schools on the other. Those are 2 files to pull from. It's very impressive. A couple of rules. If you're a school and you have a vehicle, it has to be in place by 8:30 because we run out of places for people to come in. School kids have to be dropped off so they walk in because we don't have places to send the cars. We get all that organized. Meanwhile, 18th Avenue is filling up. A lot of the big units are on the wrong side of the street, always facing west, and they come in and we have people put them in a slot. Others are across on the other side of 18th Avenue. Then we have American Bank Lot. Then we have all the politicians, which we gave a whole street to. And by the way, we do not give them a lineup number. We say, set it up yourself. It can be amusing. And it's all gets done. We're watching the time, and we're always watching the time. And where is the the Western Illinois band? Oh my God, they follow the GPS signal again. So they didn't end up where we wanted them to be. They're on the wrong street, and we have to back them up. Things like that have happened. We've occasionally had to have rolling bands. So, okay, we get the Rocky Band, we get the Alleman Band, we get the Western Band. Those are all taken care of. What about Rock Ridge if we have them? What about Davenport West if we have them? What about Moline? We have Moline this year. We hit upon the idea, no one says they all have to be there at 8:30. In fact, they're not even going to march until probably 10:30. So why not bring them across 20th Avenue from the east, and they drop themselves off and line up on the streets, which already been vacated by the school kids. And that has worked. Sometimes it's worked so well that Rock Ridge gets their buses lined up, they run out of the bus, they run down the street and form up, and we pull them on. It's been that tight sometimes. I think we've done as many as 3 rolling vans that way one year. It works. Everybody's paying attention, looking for them. They're there, and they're happy to be there, and they're well received by the whole town. Let's see. 18th Avenue is closed off at 8 o'clock in the morning. Believe it or not, some people still insist that that's the way they're going. No one's been killed yet. At 9:30, we've lined up the beginning of the parade, the vets groups. We bring down the marching group. The name isn't coming to me now. Thank you. Metro comes down. They've led our parade for years and years and years because you know what? If they're coming down the street, you know something else is coming too, following them. Gets the parade started. As far as I know, we have never started later than 9:35. And that's something Mary and I make sure we meet and agree that it's time to start the parade. And sometimes it's taking a couple minutes longer, but we hug each other and I tell them, go, and we go. It takes about 45 minutes to go through the parade. The first units hit the stadium area about 10:15. You may know there's another parade in East Moline that starts later in the day, same day. Well, politicians, I don't know if you've noticed this, politicians love parades. And so the ones that we get in our parade often do want to go to the one in East Moline because that's a real Labor Day and political parade. So we let them get to the high school and then we send them out to Blackhawk Road. It takes them maybe 15 minutes the way they drive to get over to East Moline, and their places are held, and it all works out very well. And sometimes other units want to do that, and that's easy to arrange at the end. The last entry reaches the stadium about 11:30, and by that time, the area around the high school, it's 2 lanes going west. I have a policeman and another person stopping people who come flying up over the hill, which is a small nightmare I have every year. That can happen. And people are sorting themselves out. The kids have gone across to get school buses on the other side of the high school. The police are also keeping this organized. People are picking up their cars. You'll be dropping off your carts. I mean, all that happens around the high school. I'm hoping to get the tennis court parking lot done by the Labor Day at the moment. Western has been very interesting because they hold a clinic for the other bands who came to on the Rocky grounds, and they don't have to do that, but they do it, and it's very, very neat to see that happen. Of course, they also want people to come to Western, but still, they don't have to do that. It's neat. Then we take them over to the high school. They get fed, and it's always interesting what they get and how they react to it every year. I could tell you stories. Meanwhile, the Edison Junior High this year will be cleaning up the whole parade route. We pay them to do that. And all the signs and banners that we've had up and they've been gathered and so forth, they get collected, put in my van, most of them. And then at 1 o'clock, we have a review session and a pizza party, and we go over the parade and also what's going on. I really thank all the volunteers. I use about 45, the Davenport Radio Club. The police, when we started the parade, the city of Rock Island had 3 patrol cars overnight. And when we started the parade, they had to give us 1. Then they realized they had to give us 2, second year. The third year, I'm not sure where they came from, but I think we might have had 4 because we took up a lot of space and we needed that kind of crowd control. Since then, it's gotten extremely well organized, and they know what's going on. We know they know what's going on, which is a comfort. And our, not our congregation, our people in the town also know what's going on. And there's a lot of trust there, I think. We ask people not to throw candy. Please don't throw candy, because it brings little kids out in the street. And we have semis. That's another nightmare.
Real quick, Art, I don't want to cut you short. You don't have to quit quite. You'll be at about 4 minutes because we got 2 other programs on this agenda. So
that's key things. We want to be safe. want to be on time, want everybody to be happy. And most of the time, all of that happens, especially the safety. And that's what our job is. Thanks for your support, and I'll see you on Labor Day.
Great. Yep. we had
Lucky
a-
for you guys, I'm a really fast talker. So not only am I a fast talker, I also have some paperwork for you, which will make things go a little faster. And here's pictures. We were hoping to have some pictures there for you, so I just grabbed a few to bring to you. Real quick, so you know, again, old-fashioned Labor Day parade. Not too many cities can say that they have that. Full of people, young and old, churches, organizations, businesses, and lots of residents, not just local, but non-Rock Islanders. I'm here to invite you to the parade. I'm here to tell you what you guys hopefully will participate in throughout the parade. So even though the council has done a variety of things throughout the years, you'll see in the letter, I won't go into it, different things like riding limos and walking. Mostly we have golf carts now. If you will go to the U.S. Bank lot the day of the parade, look for me or just find any of my crew members. We will have the U.S. Bank lot. We will have your golf carts all lined up. We will have signage on there. We will have folders to help you vote. We will have pens, and we will even have a flower for you and your loved one. Your loved ones are invited to ride with you if you like. If you need more than a 2-seat golf cart, please let us know. We'd be happy to get you 4 or 6 or whatever is needed. The other thing we ask you to do is, as Art pointed out, we get together at the end of each year and the beginning of the next year to find ways to improve. We as a committee look at how can we make this parade better, and we come up with different ideas. So one of the ideas this year is, if you look at the awards paper, I'm going fast, guys. It is, we're still going to keep the Mayor's Cup for awards. We are going to take the council choices from 7 awards down to 1. We are going to do a committee choice award or advisory board, which will be the best theme-related entry. The Citizens' Choice was normally 6. We're going to drop it to 1. But then we're going to have some category awards. Best Float, Best Business Entry, Best Church Entry, Best School Entry. And then come October, we will be back and we will let you know who won. And you guys, we invite you to help us to know who's going to win those awards. So you will get a folder that will say, pick your first, second, and third choice. Please, please do not pick the bands, because we invite the bands to be in there. And I say this every year, and every year somebody comes back with Rocky, Western, you know, and please don't pick the bands. We also ask you to please turn in your folders. We have a little bit of a problem sometimes with getting council members to turn in their folders. Yeah, you did, yes. So if you don't turn it in, then guess what? I get to vote for all of you. And I don't want to have to do that. I need your help, and we need your help as a committee. So I did this as fast as I could. If you do not find me at the end of the parade, all of us ride, or we're at the very last thing in the parade next to the street cleaner. So if you don't see me, my sister's always the one collecting the golf cart keys. Give it to her, and she'll make sure she gets it to me or any parade member if you turn it in, because we go through them by the time we sit for pizza and say, these are our winners. And then that way we know who to vote for. So again, we thank you for supporting the parade. We thank you that we can say Rock Island has the best darn parade around. And we thank you for your support, and we invite you to be a part of it. Questions, anybody? I did it as fast as I could.
You did well. I got to say, no, thank you.
Oh.
For the 3 of you and your committee and Linda and that sort of thing, because you guys put a lot of hours in. To have the consistency year after year and the enthusiasm, we wouldn't grow without your committee. And so thank you very,
Yeah.
very much for the hours you put in and enthusiasm.
And I can safely say, for all of us, it's a labor of love. We love Rock Island. We love its people. We want to say thank you to them, and this is a way to recognize them. And so we enjoy doing it. So no questions?
Well, since you're up here as a township supervisor, the yellow house I heard sold.
Yes,
the
it
South Rock
did.
Island Township.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it did. We're looking to close on that this week, and so happy to do that. And a family bought it, and I think they might do some stuff along with the church behind them, but I don't know positively.
Thank you for your leadership in the Labor Day Parade and being good stewards for our community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
We do need to move on, unfortunately. We've got two other presentations, I think, or try to squeeze them
But I
in.
do want my pictures back if I could.
They're over there. Yep. Yep.
The pictures? Thank you. Have a great night.
But thank you. Stephanie?
Well, that's a tough act to follow. Talking about debt isn't nearly as much fun as parades. But so tonight we want to hopefully spend about 25 minutes talking about a study session that we've prepared. 3 topics, really. So an update on the city's debt, the portion of the debt that's specifically related to the gaming funds that we use to pay them, and then talk about our plans for the 2019 bond issuance. Tonight, I have with me Anthony Maselli of Spear Financial. Spear Financial is the city's financial advisor. We use Spear for lots of different things, including bond compliance, annual reporting to Emma, helping us with our ratings call and bond issuances, et cetera, and other questions from time to time that he is very helpful in answering. So for the update on debt, gaming funded debt, we're going to just a quick review on the city's bond rating as we were last reviewed. A quick look at an audit schedule that details our total outstanding debt for the city, and then look at the debt that's specifically funded by gaming dollars. So we were last rated last November. Moody's called us to update our rating, and they updated it to an A2 and removed a negative outlook that had been placed on the city's rating the year before. So we are an A2. The next slide will show you kind of where that is in the scheme of bond ratings, but I gave you a little excerpt from that rating that talked about things that could lead to an upgrade or a downgrade for the city's bond rating. So this is a neat little schedule that I always have on my bulletin board in my office that has the rating scale for Moody's and the comparative ratings for S&P. So we do use Moody's for our rating. So you can see that the city of Rock Island at an A2, that first column, is approximately in the middle of investment grade bonds. So again, the bonds of the city are investment grade. We share that area, with other municipalities in the area. Some are lower, some are higher. I think state of Illinois is at the very bottom rung of that investment grade at the Baa3. City of Chicago, last time I looked, was at the top of the non-investment grade. Is that still right, Anthony? Yeah. So we are at an A2. This schedule is from my favorite section of the audit, 2018. The very back of that audit is our statistical section, but this is our outstanding debt, and probably looked at this a little bit when we went over the audit, but we have 2 different kinds of debt, governmental, and then we have business type activities. And with that, the governmental activity debt is all GO bonds, and those are paid by taxes. And then our business type activities, that is 2 different types of debt, our GO debt and loans payable. Loans payable is low interest IEPA loans that the loans payable and the GO debt on the business type are paid by user fees. So as we're going through the budget and working on the budget, we have cash flows where we're projecting what we need for user fees in order to meet the expenses of each of the funds and make sure that we have the appropriate funds to pay our debt. So total primary government column, you can see at the end of 2018, the city had $124.9 million. Again, this is principal only, so this isn't total debt service. This is not interest. So about half of it, approximately, is GO debt, and the other half is loans payable. This slide is a little excerpt on our gaming funded debt. Starting to the box to the right, this is an excerpt out of a schedule that Anthony will review later on in this presentation, and that is how our debt is structured right now, what the principal and interest payments are that are being pledged to be paid for with our gaming tax dollars. So you can see for 2019, $4.1 million in principal and interest coming out of our gaming tax. The box to the left is just a summary of some of the last 7 years or so of bond issuances and the total amount in what those issuances were for. The middle, that 2014-2015 Watchtower, $15.9 million, so that was originally issued to be paid with TIF increment and sales tax, pending a economic development project that did not come to fruition. So it's always our hope, and I continue to remind the mayor and Randy and Chandler as we someday maybe get to a development that, as we're thinking about what new revenues might come from a project, that we definitely want to get back to paying that bond issuance with funds and how it was originally issued. Any questions on that before we talk about 2019 issuance? Hearing none. So before I turn it over to Anthony, we are looking at issuing bonds for 2019. There's some opportunity for refundings. The opportunity to refund has actually changed as a result of some new laws that were passed not too long ago. But when there's a call date, we always are looking well in advance of what the bond issuance environment is like. Is there an opportunity for savings if we go through the process of issuing bonds? Because there is a cost to do that, and so we do weigh that with it. So we do have some refundings that look like they would be good to roll in. So if you're going out to the bond market, you might as well look at that. We do recommend that we restructure the Watchtower debt. We did restructure it in 2016, right, when the first year I was here, and we did a 3-year restructuring, so we restructured the next 3 years of principal, and so now we're at that point. 3 years has gone by, you know, we need to look at restructuring it again, and then some street work that we've done through engineering, and then of course our 38th Street and 18th Avenue projects, funding our portion of those projects. So in this presentation, we'll look at a timeline, and then Anthony will talk about just because he's modeled what the gaming fund would look like with a restructuring. So with that, I'll turn it over. And it's that button to the right.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good evening, everybody. I'm Anthony Maselli with Spear Financial. As Stephanie had mentioned, so we're looking at 4 series of bonds that I'll walk through. 2 are refinancings for savings, no extension of any term length, just replacing higher interest rates on the older bonds with lower interest rates today. 1 is a restructuring of the Watchtower TIF debt, and then finally the last series of bonds would be new money for street work. I guess I should have turned the page and talked about all those. So go to the 2019 A bonds. These would be a refunding of the city's 2010 A Build America bonds. The 2010 A bonds were issued at the time the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act allowed for the issuance of Build America bonds. So at that time, you can issue taxable bonds in lieu of tax-exempt bonds and receive a 35% interest rate subsidy from the federal government. Since that time, sequestration has clawed back some of that 35%, but at the time, those were that was the lowest cost way of getting new money, and a lot of people took advantage of that program. We're now several years later, 9 years later, and we have the ability to refinance those taxable bonds as tax-exempt bonds. Taking into account the reduction in the subsidy, here is the estimated debt service comparison. I know this is a little bit small, But the key thing to look at is we'd be replacing this old net debt service, that's the debt service due after the subsidy on the 2010A bonds, with the new net debt service, which would be this column here, and then taking the savings in every year. As you'll see, there's no negative savings in any year. We're not extending the term length of this issue at all. I can come over here, here would be the savings column. It's a little small, but the estimate is just about $170,000 in gross savings, a little under $150,000 on a present value basis, over about 3.2% PV. The sources and uses page for the 19A bonds, it would be about a $4.2 million bond issue as estimated, with estimated rates and costs all being a little bit conservative on these estimates until we come to the market.
Anthony, can I jump in here?
Please.
So these bonds are actually paid for with a water and wastewater fund. So these are in that enterprise, not the governmental side.
This would be the debt service schedule that would replace the debt service on the 2010A bonds. As you'll see, I think the key thing here is the current estimate was true interest cost of about 2.7% on the new bonds. That's as estimated today. The old bonds we'd be refunding ranged between 3.8 and 5.1%, but then those had the 35% subsidy. So, switching gears, the 2019 B bonds, that would be a refinancing of your 2009 C bonds. The 2009 C bonds were taxable bonds, not Build America bonds. They were issued for a purpose that had to be taxable, and we would take those out with taxable general obligation bonds. These bonds are currently callable. Savings look really good as the old bonds ranged from about 5.1% to 6%, and we'd be replacing that with much lower taxable interest rates today. This issue is smaller than the last. The last was about $4 million. This is $1.3 million. I should jump ahead in the page here, but with that, we're estimating savings of just under $140,000 on that $1.3 million issued. PV savings of about $120,000 or 8.3%, if I had my magnifying glasses, present value savings.
So if I could jump in on these. So the 2009 Cs are paid for from one of our TIF funds, so it's the Columbia Park TIF. I often get questions on why the interest rate on those bonds were so high. One, taxable, so it is a different rate, but also the way it was structured is that it was issued right as that TIF was created. So there was the funds in which to pay it was uncertain, so they were structured in a way where the first several years did not have principal. So as you delay the payment, that was one of the ways to sell the bond, is to offer a nice interest rate on those bonds. And so I see Alderman Poulos looking at me, and I really don't want to make eye contact with him. And the reason why is the holder of those bonds is our very own pension funds. And so my predecessor, Mr. Scott, organized that in such a way where the pension funds hold those bonds. And as treasurer of those pension funds, I will miss them. But this is the right thing to do.
Going to the debt service schedules, we'd be replacing, as I mentioned, the old bonds had rates between 5.1, what's remaining right now, 5.1 and 6%, replacing that with a much lower interest rate. It looks like around 3.25%. That's a bit conservative based on today's market, but still a lot of savings. The 2019 C bonds are it's going to be a taxable issue. This is the restructuring of the 2014 B issue, which was the Watchtower TIF debt. This analysis assumes the same thing we did in 2016, which is a 3-year restructuring of principal only. So essentially providing for the payment of the next 3 years of principal through another bond issue. It alleviates about 700, I'm averaging, but you can see the numbers at the top here and over here, if I can get that side. So that would be the savings for the next 3 years. As you can see, we are providing for the payment of debt service. We're not refinancing, we're restructuring. So we have to then put those payments later down the road, and that does come at a cost. We're looking at about a $1.7 million cost for doing this restructuring. The benefit there is that you know, if you don't have the funds to make those next 3 principal payments, this provides that necessary relief.
If I could add some commentary. So you can see at the very end, the years 2036 and 2037. So as we look at the time structure of these bonds, this is actually going out a couple of more years, but still keeping it within the footprint of the TIF. And so we're not going beyond that TIF, still hoping someday for development on there in which to pay these bonds.
Absolutely. Like this estimated around a $2.2 million issue for restructuring the 3 years. This would be the estimated sources and uses. Costs and everything is very conservative at this point. This would be the debt service schedule. As Stephanie had mentioned, we would be refinancing those first 3 payments and then kicking that debt out towards the end of the life of the TIF, wrapped around the existing 2014B and then 2016 bonds that were issued, all for the same purpose. Here is a snapshot again of the net debt service related to the Watchtower TIF. So this would all represent here, these columns, the principal, coupon, interest, and total P&I would be for this deal, the 2019 issue. Existing debt service is the 14Bs plus the 16s, and then new net debt service would be all of the Watchtower TIF related debt. We presented a second option for consideration, which is, first option was a continuation of what we did in 2016, a 3-year restructuring. So buying you 3 more years to hope for some development on that site, and then debt service can start to be repaid out of those revenues. If 3 years isn't the right time horizon, we could look to restructure more of that debt. So this assumes a 5-year restructuring of debt. Obviously, much more cost related to restructuring 2 additional years of non-callable bond maturities. That's the drawback, right? We're taking out bonds that aren't callable, and we're doing it now 5 years ahead of time. Benefit is, if you don't reasonably expect there to be any movement on that site in 3 years, we may be doing this again. So it saves you some transaction costs having to go through this process again. So there is no right answer, whether to go 3 years or 5 years, only based on what your decision and your thoughts would be on when revenues might be sufficient or starting to come in on that site. With the 5-year restructuring, the estimate is about a $3 million cost. But like I said, if we ended up coming back in 3 years and doing another 2-year restructuring, it's not much of a difference there. We just have to do it all over again. Same pages for this restructuring sources and uses. Now we're looking at a $3.4 million issue. Again, wrapping all that debt service back around towards the end of the life of the TIF. And then there would be the net debt service now. So you're getting much lower debt service up here in the front, hoping for some redevelopment in the back end here. I will mention that the bonds due 24 and thereafter of the 14B bonds are refundable. So when we get out to that point, 2023, 2024, we can start to look at if there's any interest rate savings and take advantage of that as well. And then finally, we have the 2019 D bonds, and this assumes a $2 million project deposit for street work. The issue slightly under $2 million based on current rates and bond issue premium. I've structured this issue to begin maturing in 2025, and then point out over here. So there would be no principal repaid for the first several years, and we'll go into the gaming debt analysis to show you kind of why, but essentially trying to ease the reliance of gaming debt, or I'm sorry, of gaming revenue for debt service. We're looking at future ways to do that, issuing new bonds and putting them up in these constraint areas where you already have a lot of debt service coming due on the gaming revenue would kind of be counterproductive to that goal. So if we move forward today, here is the timetable for the issuance of the bonds. Obviously, the study session is on there for today. We would next be back to City Council for the first reading of an ordinance on August 12th, and then a second reading on August 26th. In that time, we would be drafting the offering document, reaching out to the rating agency, Moody's, having a rating call, receiving the rating, and then getting ready for the sale and issuance of the bonds. We're looking right now at potential bond sale early September, and then closing towards the end of September, the week of September 23rd. So at that point, refinance all the old debt, restructure the amount of debt that is chosen to restructure, and then provide the $2 million for street work. That was a lot on the 2019 bonds. I think the rest of this covers the gaming debt restructuring and some of the things we've been looking at. Are there any questions on the 19 bonds?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm going to jump back to page 6 of 35, where you have a debt update / gaming funded debt. The last column on the right has list per capita debt, and that's listed on the bottom line as $3,201 per capita. So I don't know if anybody's calculated any of this yet, but how is that going to change if all these restructurings occur?
Theoretically. So math-wise, as that bigger number that's divided by the population increases, that per capita amount would increase. We do continue to borrow more on the IEPA loans as well. And so that's, I think I could predict that in 2019 and beyond, you'll see that number continue to grow. So it will be a little higher, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Especially just with the IEPA loans, for sure.
I was hoping it would shrink.
Yeah. One thing I will mention is that the only new debt from all of these issues was the $2 million for roads. So there's a lot of issues for refunding, which just replaces an existing loan. Wouldn't change that number.
Thanks.
I had a few questions for Stephanie would be the appropriate person. Thank you very much for your help in explaining all of this numbers business. So with, if we decide to pursue the restructuring debt and the new debt for street improvements, what's that going to do with Moody's, right? You don't got a crystal ball, but are we, one of the threats, or I don't remember the exact word that you had up there, but one of the potential prompters for further downgrading is additional debt, right? So I guess in your professional opinion, are we going to further decline in our Moody's rating by doing this, or is this not that big of a debt increase that will change that? What do you think?
Well, let me say a couple words, and then I might turn it over to you, because you sit in on more ratings calls than me. My sense, and I don't have a crystal ball, but my sense is that there would not be a negative influence on our credit rating. I do think we'll stay at the A2, but you never know. I can tell you that when we're sitting on a ratings call with Randy and Chandler and Anthony's on the line, is that we have a really good sales team and really highlight all of the good things that are going on in the community and economic development projects and revenue trends and explaining things. And I do feel that we have a good story. They do look at metrics. And they have their formulas that they use, and, you know, at the end of the day, that's what will drive the ratings. But I do think there's a lot of good things going on too, so we would have to see, because we'll find out soon enough. But do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. I think I would be more concerned if there were currently a negative outlook on the rating, as there was in the past. Also, given the size of this issuance, the new money portion being $2 million, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would, if they reviewed you in November of 17 or November of 18, and you paid debt in December of 18 and are about to pay debt in December of 19, I would imagine more than $2 million is rolled off as the time we're replacing that number. So if they're just looking at pure metrics, it's not going to be a big material change in the amount of debt you have with that $2 million issuance.
Yeah, I guess
This
that makes
was-
sense. The total net debt that we have wouldn't be changing much.
Right. I mean, if this was 30, 40, or 50 million, might be a, much different consideration for what Moody's is going to think versus 2 million for streets.
All right, a few other questions, sorry to keep going here, but, so the restructuring bond or issuance, or whatever the right word is, so we have the option of the 5-year restructuring, but we also have the option to not restructure the debt, correct? We would just have to pay the current amount that we owe out of our, general fund or however else, which is just gonna mean a bigger, deficit when we do budget this year. Is that correct?
Yes.
I mean, we do have the option, it's just, it's that trade-off of, do we have more short-term pain of having to pay what we owe currently now, or the 3 to 5 year relief,
Right.
and hoping that we're gonna have something happen there in 3 to 5 years, and then having even more debt 3 to 5 years down the road than we do currently. So, I don't know, I mean, I would really like to not do that, but I'm not the professional finance people that make that decision. But if it's just a matter of if we have to raise property taxes a little bit to cover what we owe this year instead of kicking the can further down the road for a higher total debt, I would be in support of that.
On the restructuring, does the interest rate changes? So we would be restructuring at a lower interest rate?
Yes and no. So we would be restructuring bonds issued at a point when interest rates were higher. However, we're restructuring bonds due over the next 3 years and then placing those bonds 20 years out. So there likely will be no interest cost savings by doing that, just because of where you're having those bonds mature, even if it was a higher rate time in 14 versus today.
Overall, we're gonna be paying more
Yes,
on the debt,
absolutely.
right? And then my third question, I guess, kind of plays into that too, of the additional new $2 million bonding for street improvements. We've kicked around several ideas for new ways to generate revenue for street improvement. We have a resolution currently for the local gas tax revenue going towards that. We kicked around ideas like a wheel tax, the different parcel taxes, stuff like that. Again, it may not be popular, but could we consider adding some sort of fee to your utility bill or something like that that will generate $2 million instead of putting it on our credit card, and it's gonna cost taxpayers more eventually because we don't wanna, I mean, we're still charging the taxpayers for this, we're just not doing it in their face, right? So that would be my preference, of just having to bite the bullet and not bond and just have a parcel fee or something like that that will go to street improvements.
Well, my concern, and having lived through the time when we had wheel tax and having to go out and enforce that, and dealing with the citizens over that, we need to think that through very carefully before we.
It doesn't have to be a wheel tax, and that's fine. I'm just saying, find some additional source of revenue to pay for this instead of putting it on our city credit card and saying, hey, we'll figure out how to pay this later. I mean, it's not fun. Nobody wants to make that decision, but I don't know, what's more responsible, right? Those are my 2 cents. Thank you very much for
Absolutely.
your
I have
guidance.
the gaming debt restructuring. I can go through that quickly. I know you'd be mindful. Yeah, absolutely. So the numbers are in the back, so they're part of your packet, but Stephanie had touched on the amount of debt service being paid by gaming revenue. What we want to look at in the next several years as these transactions begin to become refundable is refinancing those issues, taking some steps to restructure them, at least partially, and lowering that reliance on gaming revenues so that you, on an annual basis, can use those revenues for other things and not need to go to the market for new money for $2 million for a street, have more available cash for a pay-go type process. So this is quickly, Schedule 1 is just the deals this year, as I had shown. This is the 3-year restructuring of the Watchtower TIF and the new money for the roads. So you can see that you go from about, a little over $4 million in debt service paid by gaming to about 3.5, and then it jumps back up to $4 million in 3 years. In the future, there are some other opportunities to refinance bonds and push some debt service out in order to level out that payment and that reliance on gaming. This isn't a decision that needs to be made today, but it's opportunities down the road to restructure that debt service as necessary, if desired. So, great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, that's all that, we're gonna have time for the other one?
Maybe Matt can just talk about his part. John, why don't we just have Matt answer some questions here at this point, or give his little spiel? So Matt's taking a look at the question was our harassment/bullying policy, and Matt can kind of go over that. He's reviewed it and give you his thoughts.
So I reviewed the policy to determine whether or not bullying should be a part of it, and bullying is actually a part of it. It's a part within the policy itself now. You've got a very robust and a very good policy. You're leading the pack, so to speak, for the areas around here, and you address those issues within the policy and the harassment policy you have now. My concern is that if you were to go to a standalone bullying policy, you would be overwhelming the system, so to speak, and really kind of duplicative of what you already have. That's my point.
I have a question.
Sure.
So I will preface this by saying that I have been bullied and harassed in the workplace in a prior position, and my employer acted very responsibly and quickly in handling that situation, which I appreciate. What concerns me is I do believe there is some workplace harassment and bullying going on currently in the city. I realize we don't have a separate bullying policy, but could we find businesses in the area who do have a bullying policy, and we can review those to see if there's any additional things we can add to our workplace harassment policy to make it a little bit stronger and have some action items in here?
We could do that. We can do anything, but the problem is that my advice to most organizations, businesses, for-profit, non-for-profit, public sector, private sector, is not to duplicate, because what you're doing is you're taking away your eye on the ball of the harassment based on a protected status. And there are so many protected statuses that you're basically losing those, because now it could just be that you have somebody, you looked at me wrong, you did that. I'm not trying, but it takes away from the emphasis on the protected status, harassment, discrimination, bullying that we want to protect. The other thing is it's a management view. It's a management way, how you just said, how they handled it. And that's really what it is how do the supervisors handle it? How are they able to diffuse it? How are they able to address it? And that's within your policy as you have standing now. I advise 90% of my clients not to do a duplication with a bullying policy, because I feel that the policies you have, especially in light of what I've seen in the area, and not only that, if you look in the public sector and you look at municipalities, you have very few. You are the leader in this area for such to make sure that it addresses. Because remember, yours says only especially, and it gears towards, it doesn't use the term, you could put in bullying, harassment, discrimination, bullying policy, and put the word in if you'd like. But I wouldn't have a standalone policy.
When was this policy written?
When would the what?
What was
The
this?
policy you're referring to, when was it written and adopted?
I'm not sure.
I think
It was actually,
I think to kind of piggyback on what Alderwoman Swanson was saying, a lot has changed in the past 5 years in our understanding of this concept of toxic stress and what it involves in terms of our work environments. So if we have an existing policy, and we're hearing from Alderman Swanson this, and I've heard it too, about bullying going on perhaps within our own staff, maybe we need to tighten up our current policy and have a zero tolerance, have more accountability among managers? Is that what you're suggesting?
This policy was revised in October of 18.
18?
Yes, it's very recent.
Okay.
So we've got like, I don't even know what our policy is, right? I would request that we postpone this conversation to a study session when we could have a lot more time to discuss it. I think that there's a number of us that have raised this with Randy and staff.
It's fine.
I would like to have time to be educated by our staff on what our policy is, what are some other alternatives that other municipalities have undertaken, stricter, looser, I don't know how you want to phrase it, but I think that we just need to have more time to discuss this, and so let's pause
Fine.
and do
And
it.
and actually, if I could real quick, is that a lot of times bullying and harassment are done interchangeably, and that's how they're used in the policies. And very
Right.
few policies clearly, and you can add bullying to your policy.
Yeah.
But that would be, it's just like saying it again and again, repetitively. Sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
My kindergarten daughter about Billy the Bully. I mean, sometimes you have to repeat it in order for it to work.
I'd be happy to do it. I've got a number of opinion letters. I've looked at all the policies across the country, and I have a pretty good.
I would also like to see actionable steps included, because I think just referring it off to somebody to review, that's well and good. But I think if there's a legitimate case, then there needs to be some actionable steps that we follow, and not just, it's up to the supervisor's discretion. If it comes up, then.
That's not what it is, though. It's up to
Right.
an investigation. They have to be investigated at this point.
Right, okay.
I think we all agree we want a good, safe work environment for our dedicated employees, and so let's do as Alderman Parker suggested, have some more time for this.
Okay.
So I do apologize, the first presentation told me they were going to take 10 minutes. So we had, yeah, I think people enjoyed seeing that, but had I known that they were going to take half an hour, we would have started at 5 o'clock because the other two presentations were pretty important, and apologize for not getting it in.
I do have like about a 10-page review of this whole thing, so I'll be able to.
Could you send that to us?
That'd be great,
Yep.
thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. All right. Start the city council about 5 minutes.